Hey there. Ready to dive into something pretty interesting?
Always.
Well, today we're going to be looking at the world of scholarly impact, in management education.
Okay.
We're going to compare what's considered to be impactful research
Mm-hmm.
to what actually ends up in those textbooks that future business leaders use.
Yeah, that's a great question.
It really kind of gets at the heart of
Yeah.
this whole science practice gap idea that
Right.
we hear so much about.
Yeah. We've got a fascinating study here
Mhm.
that actually analyzed 38 popular textbooks,
Wow.
thousands of sources, citations
Wow.
across all different fields: organizational behavior, human resource management,
Huh?
strategic management, general management, really trying to get a sense of what knowledge actually transfers from those journals to
Mhm.
what students are learning.
Okay, so let's break it down. First of all, what did they find about the most cited sources in these textbooks? Are we talking about the usual suspects?
Yeah.
The big journals that everybody's always referencing.
Well, that's where things get interesting right off the bat.
Okay.
The top 50 most cited sources are
Yeah.
actually a mix of academic and non-academic publications.
Okay.
And in some fields, like general management and HRM, it's almost a 50-50 split.
50-50. That is not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Okay, so alongside the big names like the Journal of Applied Psychology,
Right.
Strategic Management Journal, what else are we seeing in there?
You're seeing major newspapers like the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
You're seeing business publications like Bloomberg Businessweek, Fortune.
Hmm.
You're even seeing some more specialized publications like HR Magazine and Compensation and Benefits Review.
Okay. So pretty diverse set of sources there.
Yeah.
What does that tell us about what students are actually being exposed to?
I think what's really great about that variety is that
Yeah.
students are getting exposed to both rigorous academic research, but also getting those real-world perspectives from practitioners and journalists.
Yeah.
So they're kind of getting, a more holistic picture of the business world.
So you're saying we're seeing an attempt to bridge that gap
Yeah,
between the ivory tower and what's actually going on in the real world.
exactly. But here's where things get even more interesting.
Oh,
When they zoomed in to individual articles and chapters,
okay.
they actually found something different.
Okay.
About 89% of the most cited items within those chapters
Mm-hmm.
were actually from academic journals.
Oh, so the research is still a dominant force.
It is, yeah.
That's interesting. So that research is really still having an influence
Mm-hmm.
on what's going into these textbooks.
Yeah, but there's another layer to that. A significant portion of those citations, almost 24%, are what are called literature reviews.
Okay, now for those of us who aren't deep in the world of academia, what exactly is a literature review?
So imagine you're trying to understand a really complex topic.
Yeah.
And you have to go read, hundreds of research articles to really
Oh.
understand that topic. That would be really overwhelming, right?
Yes.
That's where literature reviews come in. They
Right.
basically do the hard work for you.
Right.
They synthesize those key findings from many different studies
Okay.
to give you the big picture. And what's interesting here is that the proportion of literature reviews cited is much higher
Okay.
than what you actually see published in academic journals.
Oh, that's fascinating. So what's the takeaway there?
Yeah.
What does that tell us about the role of textbooks?
Well, it really highlights the role of textbooks as knowledge distillers.
Okay.
They take this complex research
Yeah.
and make it more digestible for students.
Yeah.
You could almost say that the textbook authors are actually doing the work of making research more accessible
Right.
and understandable,
Right.
which is really crucial if you want to impact those future business leaders.
So it makes sense. They're curating the most important research and then packaging it in a way that's actually relevant and applicable
Exactly.
to what students will face in the real world.
Absolutely. And this leads to another really fascinating finding in this study, which is the impact of the authors themselves.
Oh, interesting.
So they looked at the authors who were
Mhm.
most frequently cited in these textbooks
Mm-hmm.
and then compared that to how often those same authors were cited in those academic journals.
Right.
The kind that can really impact a professor's career.
Absolutely.
Um,
So what did they find?
yeah, so they found a surprisingly weak relationship.
Interesting.
And in some of the business fields, there was almost no connection at all.
Mm.
So what that means is that some of those big names in research
Yeah.
might not be having as much impact
Mhm.
on what's actually being taught to future business leaders.
That's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah.
Who's influencing academic research?
Right.
isn't necessarily who is shaping the minds of future business leaders.
Exactly. And it raises some interesting questions about how different kinds of knowledge and contributions are actually valued.
Okay.
So the study also looked at which universities were most represented by those top-cited textbook authors.
Okay.
And again, it varied by field.
So which schools came out on top?
For organizational behavior and human resource management, it was Michigan State University.
Okay.
And for strategic management and general management, Harvard was leading the pack.
Okay, so not necessarily the same schools dominating in each area. What's the takeaway from that?
It shows that expertise and influence in business education
Yep.
is spread across a variety of institutions.
All right.
You know, no single university has a monopoly on shaping business practice.
So for you listening, this whole deep dive is a reminder that the business knowledge that you're getting from those textbooks, it's coming from a pretty complex ecosystem. It's not just a straight line from academic journals to your classroom.
Exactly. And this is where things get really, really fascinating. This study kind of shines a light on this almost hidden ecosystem of knowledge, you know?
Yeah.
It challenges that assumption that the flow of knowledge is only one way, you know, from research journals to textbooks.
Right.
It's more like this dynamic exchange where research findings and insights from practice and even the way those textbooks are designed are all sort of coming together to shape business education.
It makes me think about my own experience as a student. You don't really stop to think about all those forces that are shaping what you're learning. You just sort of take the textbook at face value.
Right. But I think what this study really highlights is that textbooks are carefully crafted narratives.
Okay.
You know, they're trying to blend that academic rigor with those practical realities of the business world. The goal is really to equip students with both, you know, theoretical understanding, but also those skills to navigate the real world.
And those textbook authors, the ones who are bridging that gap, they're the ones who can take that complex research and translate it into something that's actionable.
Exactly.
For future business leaders.
Absolutely. And that translation process is so critical, you know?
Right.
Research can't just stay within the walls of academia.
Yeah.
It needs to be communicated effectively to have real impact. It's like that saying, you know, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound?
Yeah.
I love that.
You could say the same thing about research. If groundbreaking research is published, but it never reaches the people who can actually use it, you know, what's the point?
Exactly. It has to be presented in a way that's engaging and relevant.
Right.
That makes students actually care about it.
Exactly.
And see how it applies to the challenges that they'll face in their careers.
You know, it's not about just cramming facts and figures into their heads.
Yeah.
It's about equipping them with, you know, those mental models and frameworks
to navigate the complexity of the business world. And that requires thinking differently about how we create and share knowledge. You know, it's not just about writing for other academics, it's about reaching a broader audience.
Right, and we can't forget the role that those non-academic sources are playing too. You know, the Bloomberg Businessweek articles,
Absolutely.
the Wall Street Journal articles.
Yeah.
They give us a window into what's happening right now.
Right.
You know, what are the trends? What are the challenges? What are the new ideas?
Yeah. They help connect the dots between theory and practice.
Exactly.
And add that kind of immediacy and relevance to what students are learning.
Yeah, they ground those academic concepts in reality.
Yeah.
They show how they play out.
Exactly.
So taking all this together, it seems like we really need to rethink how we evaluate and reward the impact of business knowledge.
Yeah.
If we want to encourage more of this bridge building between academia and the working world.
I think you've hit on a really crucial point. You know, it's about recognizing that impact takes many forms.
Okay.
Publishing in top journals is one way, but so is writing influential textbooks, engaging with the media, working directly with practitioners. You know, all of these contribute to the advancement of knowledge and practice.
It's about expanding our definition of success.
Absolutely.
It's not just about counting citations and looking at journal rankings.
Exactly. And that's what we need to do if we want to close that science practice gap.
This has been a fascinating conversation. It's really making me think about those textbooks in a whole new way.
I know.
For those of you listening, what are your thoughts on how we can do a better job of recognizing and rewarding these different ways that knowledge makes an impact? We would love to hear from you on social media.
And As we continue this deep dive, we'll be exploring some of the challenges and opportunities that come with taking a broader view of knowledge transfer.
Stay tuned as we uncover the surprising connections between what's considered impactful in research and what shapes the minds of future business leaders. So it's not just what gets cited, it's also who is being cited.
Right.
That
Exactly.
whole idea of authors and their impact.
Yeah, and it gets at this broader question, right?
Mm,
It's not just about the research itself.
okay.
It's also about the people behind it
Yeah.
and how their work shapes the field.
So what did they find when they kind of dove into this author impact piece?
Well, they looked at which authors were cited the most in those textbooks that we were talking about.
Okay.
And they compared that to
Yeah.
how often those same authors were being cited in the academic journals.
Right. So is there a connection?
That's the thing. There isn't a strong one. In some fields, there was almost no connection at all.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So what that means is that some researchers who are kind of superstars in those academic circles, they may not be having a big impact on the textbooks.
Wow, that is so interesting.
Right. And on the flip side, there could be authors out there who are really influential in the textbook world,
Yeah.
but maybe not getting as much recognition in academia.
It really challenges that assumption that those two worlds are perfectly aligned.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder about the different ways we measure impact and success.
So besides those individual authors,
Mhm.
did this study look at any other factors that might influence what ends up in these textbooks?
They did. They also looked at which universities were most represented by those top-cited authors. Where did those authors get their PhDs or where are they teaching?
Okay, so is there a particular school that's really dominating
Yeah.
the textbook world?
Well, it depends on the field.
Sure.
For OB and HRM, the top spot went to Michigan State University.
Michigan State.
But for strategic management and general management, it was Harvard.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, it seems like.
Right. And it shows that expertise and influence in business education, it's spread across different institutions.
So for you listening, what this all means is that the business knowledge you're absorbing from those textbooks,
Yeah.
it's coming from a really dynamic and multifaceted ecosystem. It's not just a straight line from journals to textbooks.
Exactly. There are all these different factors at play. Individual authors, institutions, real-world trends, and even the way the material is presented.
And that hidden ecosystem, it's something we don't always think about as students.
Right. We might not even realize all the choices and decisions that went into shaping that book we're reading.
Exactly. But this research really makes you stop and consider all those forces behind the scenes.
And it makes you appreciate the role of those textbook authors even more, right? They're curating this vast body of knowledge and distilling it down into something that's relevant and engaging for us.
It's almost like they're acting as translators.
Absolutely. They're bridging that gap between theory and practice,
Yeah.
making those complex ideas accessible and applicable.
And that translation process, it's critical if we want research to have a real impact.
Right. It's not enough to just publish in prestigious journals. The knowledge needs to reach a wider audience. It needs to be understood and applied in the real world.
And that's where those non-academic sources come in, right?
Yeah.
The articles from business magazines, case studies, news stories, they bring in that real-world perspective,
Yeah.
showing how those theoretical concepts actually play out.
They add that layer of context and immediacy, making the material more relatable and engaging for students.
It's all about connecting those dots between what's happening in the classroom
Yeah.
and what's happening out there in the business world.
And I think that's a key takeaway from this whole deep dive. We need to move beyond that narrow view of impact, the one that focuses solely on citations and journal rankings.
Right.
Impact takes many forms, and it's all about how knowledge is created, shared, and ultimately used to make a difference.
So as you continue your own deep dives into the world of business knowledge, remember to think critically about where that knowledge is coming from and how it's shaping your understanding of the field.
And remember, impact isn't just about what you read, it's about what you do with that knowledge. How do you apply it? How do you share it? How do you make it your own?
You know, this is really making me think back to my own business education.
Yeah.
Like, did I really get that balanced perspective? Did my textbooks actually expose me to, not just the hard research, but also what was going on
Yeah.
in the real world?
Right. It's something we don't always stop to consider,
Yeah.
but it's a crucial question, especially for educators. We have a responsibility to choose materials that give students that well-rounded view.
It makes me wonder, we talk so much about this science practice gap. Is it really a gap,
Yeah.
or is it just different perspectives?
That's a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
Maybe researchers and practitioners are just coming at things from different angles
Right.
with different goals in mind.
So maybe instead of trying to close a gap,
Mm-hmm.
we should be focusing on building bridges between those perspectives.
I love that. Building bridges.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy. We need
Mhm.
more collaboration, more synergy between academia and the business world.
And, those textbooks can be a powerful tool
Absolutely.
to help make that happen.
When you think about it, a lot of those textbook authors,
Yeah.
they're professors who are also doing consulting. They're out there in the real world.
Right.
They're in a unique position to connect those dots.
So they can bring their research into those consulting projects
Yeah.
and then bring those practical insights back into the classroom.
And that benefits everyone, the researchers, the practitioners,
Yeah.
and especially the students.
And for you listening, this whole conversation, this deep dive, is a reminder that business knowledge, it's not static. It's constantly evolving.
Absolutely. New research, new technologies, new challenges. It's a dynamic field.
Yeah, so you got to stay curious. Question those assumptions.
Definitely.
And seek out multiple
Those
perspectives.
are the keys to being a lifelong learner.
And remember those textbooks that you're relying on. They're just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. They're a starting point for your own exploration of the business world.
And as you go on that journey,
Yeah.
remember that knowledge. It's most valuable when you can understand it and apply it to real situations.
So keep asking questions, keep learning, keep connecting those dots between theory and practice. That's how you'll make a real impact.
Well said. That wraps up our deep dive into the world of scholarly impact. We hope this episode has given you some new insights and maybe even challenged some of your assumptions about how business knowledge is created and shared.
Remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Join us on social media to share your thoughts and keep the discussion going.
Until next time, keep diving deep.